Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd, coming to you live from the home office in beautiful Los Angeles, California. Today we're going to talk about an interesting group of animals called cephalopods. So the most famous of those is an animal called the octopus. And we're going to go through and talk a little bit about them, who they are, where they live, what they do, how they're related, what makes them different from each other, and similar things. So hold on, we're in for a fun ride. To start off with, octopus and the family of, or the group of animals called cephalopods are all invertebrates. That means they don't have a bony skeleton, no backbones at all, which is a very big difference from any of the other animals we've talked about on Critter Chat so far. Speaking of Critter Chat, today's a pretty special day. It's episode 8, which means that Zoo Nerd has officially been up and doing Critter Chats now for a week. So I hope you've had fun, and I encourage you to continue to share it and like it so that we can continue to grow as a community. Anyway, talking about the cephalopod class, they belong to a group of animals called mollusks. And mollusks are a bunch of large, it's a big organization of different types of animals. Mollusks include things like snails and slugs, clams, oysters, mussels, and then of course our subject today, the cephalopods. Now cephalopods are defined as a class of animals, which is a pretty big distinction. And in their class of animals, they are known for having arms or tentacles, blue-colored blood. They move through a series of different ways, but one of the most common across all species is through propulsion. So they use thrusting of water to help move them through the water. The entire group of animals of cephalopods are all aquatic. They all spend their life in the water. They have gills to extract the oxygen that they need for their bodies. And in general, they grow pretty quick and have relatively short lifespans. Typically, their daytime activities involves them hunkering down in like a crevice or dark, deep water to hide from predators. And they really kind of are most active at night, or nocturnal animals. That is typically when they are out hunting, although there are definitely some individual species that are variations and differences from that. To start off with, we're going to talk about the octopus group of animals. There are over 300 different octopus species, and I looked it up to see how do you say plural octopus. There are multiple ways to say it, so you can say octopus, meaning multiple. You can say octopuses, or you could say octopi. And I prefer saying octopi because that just makes it sound like I have 8 or octo pies. And who doesn't want 8 pies? That sounds delicious. But the group of octopi, like I said, has over 300 different species within their group. And there's new species of octopi discovered almost every year. That's one real fascinating thing about marine biology or ocean science. We're still learning a lot. There's a lot we don't know, and we continue to find out new things as a scientific community. So octopus are defined by specifically having 8 arms. Now there's a difference between arms and tentacles. We'll go over that right now. Arms have suction cups all the way to the tip. So with an octopus, they have arms, not tentacles. Tentacles don't have suction cups the whole way, they just have them on the tips. So a tentacle is something similar to like what squid have and other members of the cephalopod group. But octopus have arms because they have arms with suction cups the length of the arm. The largest of all octopuses is called the giant Pacific octopus. And although giant is in the name, they're not that huge. They can weigh about 50 pounds, which is good size. That's a really good size animal for an animal that doesn't have any bones. But giant sometimes makes me think that it's enormous, like an elephant or something, and they are not that big. They weigh about 50 pounds, which is about the same as a medium-sized dog. They can be 15 feet from tip to tip of their different arms though. So that's a pretty big span. At the aquarium I work at, I get to see a giant Pacific octopus pretty much every day that I work. There's one in an area right close to one of the stations I man. So I enjoy seeing him move around quite a bit. Also with octopus, they have a very hard, almost parrot-like beak for a mouth. And that makes up the hardest part of their body. The rest of their body is entirely soft and squishy. And they can fit through very tight spaces as long as it's big enough for their little mouth, their beak part, to fit through. So typically on the biggest of octopus, that's a space about this big. So that's pretty remarkable that a 50-pound animal can squeeze through a spot a bit bigger than like a silver dollar. Pretty crazy stuff. Octopus are masters of camouflage. They can change both their color and the texture of their body to blend in. I've seen this happen with our octopus or octopi that we have at the aquarium, and it's really incredible. We have an octopus, the one that I featured in the preview video today, that is called a day octopus. And when that day octopus comes down to the gravel on the base of its aquarium, it can change instantly to the color and texture to blend into the gravel. So that gravel is very light colored and very rocky looking, and it becomes that color and looks that texture. It also has a big rock in the middle of its exhibit, and when it sits on top of the rock, it becomes the color and the texture of that rock that's almost like a lava rock kind of look. So a darker, like reddish color. But they're really good at changing color, blending into their surroundings. If you're at an aquarium and looking for an octopus and you can't see it, I suggest you look for the suction cups that are on the ends of their, or on any of their arms. That's a good giveaway because the suction cups usually don't change color as much. An octopi or octopus has 3 hearts and 9 brains, which is fascinating. They kind of have one central brain, and then each arm kind of has another brain that helps control the movement of that arm and coordinates with the central brain to help them function. They can regrow an arm if it's cut off, as long as part of it remains. So on us, if it was cut off at the shoulder, that's probably a done deal. You'd be one-armed. But if it's cut off below that, like just above the elbow, you could probably regrow your arm if you're an octopus, which is pretty incredible. They are also super intelligent. Some scientists have equated them to the intelligence of like a house cat. So they will sometimes know their people that take care of them in like an aquarium setting. They definitely can solve problems. At the aquarium, we often put their food in a jar and put the lid on, and they're capable of opening the lid to get into their food. We also give them toys, kind of like you would give to a dog, that they like to play with. Really smart animals, octopi. Moving on, we're going to talk next about one of my favorite members of the cephalopod group, which are called cuttlefish. And that's with T's, not D's, so they don't like to cuddle. The cuttlefish are really unique animals. They were an animal I didn't even know about until later in life. I'll put up a video of them on the Facebook profile later. But they have 8 arms, kind of like an octopus, but also 2 tentacles. And so the difference is those tentacles for a cuttlefish are usually longer, and those have suction cups on just the end. And that's important for when they're hunting. Cuttlefish are very slow moving, or it looks that way most of the time, but they can really change color in vibrant patterns, and that sometimes attracts other animals. They're like, "Ooh, what's all this light? What's all this color going on over here?" And as like a little fish or a shrimp comes near the cuttlefish, it has its little wiggly arms sitting out, and the shrimp or the fish comes up close to those arms, and then the cuttlefish will shoot its tentacles out and grab that fish or that shrimp and have a nice meal from it. Cuttlefish also are a unique member of the cephalopod group in that they have a hard part of their body, part of their anatomy is inside of their body, and it is called a cuttle bone. It's made of calcium. And if any of you have ever heard of that before, a cuttle bone, when I was a kid, we had a pet parakeet, and we would buy a cuttle bone for it to sharpen its beak on. And that's pretty common in like the parrot and parakeet world, to give them something to sharpen their beak so that they have good health in their beak. And cuttlebone is something that is often used for that, and that does come from cuttlefish, which is kind of an odd, weird thing that humans figured out could work for parrots and parakeets. Cuttlefish, the largest of the cuttlefish is the Australian cuttlefish. It can be about 20 inches long and can weigh about 20 pounds. So that's pretty good size for a cuttlefish. They're really good, like I said, of flashing their colors and changing their patterns, and they are expert predators by curling their tentacles up in their arms and then shooting those out. Really cool animals, the cuttlefish. Next, we're going to talk about the member of the cephalopod group that is the most different from the others, and that is called the nautilus. Nautilus are also amazing creatures. I didn't know about them until I was an adult. Nautilus live in a shell that kind of looks like a snail shell. And remember at the beginning we talked that the cephalopods are related to mollusks, or part of the mollusk family, which includes snails. So the nautilus share that shell structure, kind of like a snail, but they're not down on the ground or the seafloor crawling around. They're floating in the water, and they hold their shell kind of upside down with the opening up at the top, and the animal lives at the opening of the shell. And they have up to 90 little arms that hang out of the shell, no suction cups for the nautilus, and they use those little arms to kind of propel and move their shell around. Really fascinating animals. They have the external hard shell, which makes them different from other members of the cephalopods. And then the largest of their family is called the chambered nautilus, and they're about 10 inches in diameter, so about the size of a dinner plate. And they can not retract into the shell, so not like a snail that pulls all the way into its shell. The cuttlefish is always hanging out, or sorry, the nautilus is always hanging out the front of their shell. They are also the longest lived members of the cephalopod family, so they can live up to 20 years. And there are 6 species of cuttlefish. They are, of nautilus, and they are mostly found in warm waters. So those are the nautilus. The final group of animals of the cephalopod group are the squid. And squid are really incredible animals. They have the biggest size range of any of these groups. Squid typically have 8 arms and 2 longer tentacles. So that's kind of like our friends the cuttlefish. The squid also have kind of similar anatomy there. The largest is the giant squid or the colossal squid. It kind of depends on what you're basing that on, whether it's weight or whether it's length. Both are good contenders. Also, both those species, we don't know a lot about them. So they can be around 40 feet long and weigh over 1,000 pounds. So that's the giant squid and the colossal squid. More on both those in a moment. The smallest squid is called a pygmy squid, and they are only about 1 inch long, and they weigh less than a paperclip. So those are some of the smallest members of the cephalopod family. Now, squid are torpedo shaped, so that's kind of elongated, whereas octopus are more round, squid are more long. They also have 2 little fins along the outside of the main part of their body, and those wiggly fins help to move them and steer them, while their tentacles kind of are doing more, or their arms and tentacles are doing more things like feeding, but they can like hurry and squish those in, and that helps propel them if they need to move fastly. Squid can have great maneuverability and really good speed. I'll post some videos of some squid later that are really fascinating. Squid are found globally, and there's about 300 different species of squid. So they can be found in almost every ocean environment and everywhere in the world temperature-wise, which is pretty crazy. Because yeah, that's a pretty diverse group of animals if they can do that. Squid are an important source of food for humans. I remember hearing a strange news story a while back that there was actually a huge amount of extra squid in the sea right around Japan. They attributed that to like really good breeding conditions for squid, and also some of the predators that eat squid had kind of disappeared from that area, so they had tons and tons of extra squid. And the government was actually encouraging chefs to find new and exciting ways for people to eat squid, in hopes that people would be more interested in fishing for squid and kind of help control the squid population, so that some of the fish species that squid eat could have a better chance that year. They came up with some really interesting things, including like a pizza that had squid on it, and also a squid flavored ice cream. Sounds delicious, huh? If you haven't eaten squid, I highly encourage it. Calamari is probably the most common way of eating squid. That's chopped up and fried. It's delicious as long as you've got great sauce and it's not too overcooked. I've also had squid steak, which was one of the most delectable meals I've ever eaten. And it was really delicious and surprising because I was a little hesitant. A squid species that I want to talk about a little bit is called the Humboldt squid. And they are about as big as I am tall. So I'm 6 feet tall, 6'1", and Humboldt squid can be about as big as I am tall. They weigh a bit less than I do. They weigh right around 100 pounds. And they were typically found from about Peru up to the middle of Mexico. And in the last 20 years or so, they've expanded their range drastically, all the way down to Chile and all the way up to Alaska. And so now they're very common up and down that Pacific coast of the Americas, throughout all of those spaces. One really interesting thing about Humboldt squid is they live in groups. They're pretty social, and their groups are called a shoal. That's what a group of squid is called, is a shoal. And they have measured some shoals of squid at 1,500 individuals, which is kind of crazy if you think about an animal that's as big as me out there in the ocean, and there's 1,500 of them swimming around together. And they communicate with each other through visual cues of the colors and the patterns that they can make on their body. So that's kind of a common theme throughout all members of cephalopods, with the exception of nautilus. They can't do it as much, but they can all kind of camouflage or blend or change their colors. And the Humboldt squid use that to communicate with each other, which is pretty crazy. I'll see if I can find a good video of them doing that, because it's pretty remarkable to see. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about the giant squid. They are by far the biggest of the cephalopods. And that was something that when I was growing up I had heard about, and they would occasionally find one dead and they would take pictures of it, and it would maybe have washed up on the shore, or maybe some fishermen found it floating out in the ocean. But they weren't really sure how big they were. They didn't know how much they would weigh. They didn't know a lot about them. And during my lifetime, the knowledge that we've gained about giant squid has definitely changed. So in 2004, Japanese researchers were able to get the first photographs of a live giant squid underwater in its natural habitat. So that was the first time we saw actual photos of a live giant squid, 2004. In 2006, they got fleeting video footage of giant squid, and that wasn't that long ago either. And in 2012 was the first time they got really good video footage of giant squid. And I'll share that video on the Facebook profile later today. They published it with Discovery Channel in 2013. And it's a pretty cool video. Really interesting animal, the giant squid. Again, they can be about 40 feet long. They can weigh over 1,000 pounds. So that's a huge animal for an animal who has no bones. So pretty remarkable. Oh, they also have the largest eyes of any animal on the planet. The giant squid and the colossal squid both have eyes that can be about 10 to 11 inches in diameter, so about the size of a dinner plate for each eyeball. Can you imagine being out in the ocean and seeing something looking back at you and its eye is that big? That would be incredible. I know I've played around with the squid at the aquarium a bit, and watching them, watching me. They're very curious animals. They have big eyes, even the little ones that we have at the aquarium that are only about 6 to 8 inches long. Their eyes are still at least the size of like a marble, or maybe a penny or a nickel. and those eyes are very good at watching back. So it's really cool group of animals, the cephalopods. So I hope you've learned something. I hope you've had some fun. I hope you're staying safe. And until tomorrow, that's it. Have a great day. Enjoy.